It's so scary, we dare you to see The Monsters Crash the Pajama Party, the first movie ever filmed in horror vision, Hollywood's latest miracle. You will scream as fiendish movie monsters actually become alive, then crash right out of the screen, go into the audience, and carry screaming girls from their seats right back into the picture to become part of the movie. We warn you, horror vision is not 3D. The movie monsters become real flesh and blood. Be sure to see The Monsters Crash the Pajama Party in horror vision and color.
What kind of a sick school is this?
Uh-oh, Dongo!
Strange things are afoot at the Circle K.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious, and don't call me Shirley.
You got spunk. I hate spunk.
Danger, Will Robinson. Danger.
Oh, righty.
How you doing?
Back off, man. I'm a scientist.
Don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
Say hello to my little friend!
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
What are you people? On dope?
Stop whining.
I got a crap on deck that can choke a donkey.
Who is your daddy?
I'm sorry, but all questions must be submitted in writing.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Can I do that?
I'll be back.
A dynamite! Show me the money!
Don't! Up your nose with your rubber hose.
A what?
I'm sailing! I'm sailing!
Groovy.
You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
Love means never having to say you're sorry.
Here's looking at you, kid.
We got no food, we got no jobs, our pets' heads are falling off!
Come to the coast, we get together, have a few laughs.
Hear that, Elizabeth? I'm coming to join you, honey!
I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV.
I love it when a plan comes together.
What we do is if we need that extra push over the cliff, you know what we do?
Put it up to 11.
11, exactly. One louder.
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
We're on a mission from God.
Hello and welcome to yet another fun-filled episode of Then Is Now podcast. I am your host, Rigor. Quite a few episodes ago, I talked about something called Spook Shows, which is an almost forgotten form of entertainment, where you would go to a movie theater after the films have been shown, and there would be a stage magician who would put on an amazing show. Monsters would come out of the screen. There would be all kinds of crazy things going on, seances and more. And these shows were wildly popular from the 1930s to the early 1970s. Well, they're not completely forgotten. Today we have a guest on the show named Keith Stickley, who runs a show called Dr. Scream's Spook Show Revival, in which he takes the spook show and performs it for a modern audience. Keith is an amazing guest, and we had a lot of fun talking about his spook shows, the history of spook shows, and his current revival show that he does. So sit back and get ready to learn about something that maybe you haven't heard of, and learn about a cool piece of entertainment that you probably never knew existed. Class is in session.
I have a bad feeling about this.
How could I possibly be expected to handle school on a day like this?
Food fight!
Hey, you in my class?
I am today.
I think you should consider transferring to shop class. Woo woo! Now, very few students are severely injured in shop class.
Bueller.
When you were in school,
Bueller.
did you ever cut class?
Bueller.
Yeah, I guess I did. Sure, most kids cut classes.
Good, sign this. Hit this.
I get so lonely when I hear that third attendance bell ring and all my kids are not here.
7 years of college down the drain.
Fat, drunk, and stupid is no way to go through life, son.
You lack discipline.
As long as I'm here, there will be no grades or gold stars or demerits. We're going to have recess all the time.
Woo!
Go, play and have fun now.
You know, ever since I first learned about spook shows, I was fascinated by them. I was very disappointed to soon after learn that there weren't spook shows being put on anymore. Fortunately for us, there is someone out there who has brought back the spook shows in a big way. And I'm so excited to talk with our next guest, Joining me today is Keith Stickley, a.k.a. Dr. Scream. He's the brains behind Dr. Scream's Spook Show Revival and is bringing the past into the present with his amazing spook shows that send you back in time with a nostalgic feel along with thrills and chills. Welcome to the show, Keith.
How you doing, man? It's great to finally meet you via voice. I'm doing great.
Excellent. Yes, I'm doing well too. And like I said, we are so excited to have you here. Keith, you were kind enough to send us pictures from your show. So what we're going to do after the recording and when this gets posted, we'll post them on our webpage in the section that will have this episode so people can see the pictures of your show. And they'll get to enjoy that. So can you describe to our audience exactly what a spook show is?
Sure. So a spook show is kind of the forerunner to the modern haunted house. Basically, what happened? We're talking pre World War II. Is there were some enterprising performers who had an idea to hold seance shows where you would communicate with the dead, that kind of thing. But unlike the sort of the Victorian seance shows of, post Civil War, these had a decided more comedy bent, more entertaining bent, a much more widespread appeal. I think Herman Weber was one of the first guys to really jump into this. Herman Weber was a magician, and he wanted to do a show where the lights would go out and ghosts and such would appear and kind of scare an audience for some fun. And it sort of evolved into this show where there was a traditional format. The traditional format was there would be a live performer, a magician, who would do about 45 minutes to an hour of magic. Then there would be what's called the blackout, where all the lights in the theater would go completely dark, and glowing monsters and creatures and stuff they would appear all over the audience and even kind of almost attack the audience in their seats.
That's cool.
And then the lights would come. Yeah. And then the lights would come on and there'd be nothing to see. Everything kind of vanished. And then they would show a horror movie. And what made this so popular is, well, a couple different things. One, we're talking in the days before there was widespread kind of curfews, right? So kids could stay out late at night, and it was an excuse to stay out late at night. It was a great date night idea because a lot of teenagers would want to take dates in there because when all the lights went out in the movie theater, people got kind of handsy, right? That was kind of part of it, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing which I find most interesting was the Spook Show was capitalism at its finest. So most of the movie theaters had movies running for regular show times, but they couldn't really show normal movies like at midnight when the theater would be available. There'd be nothing going on in there. And a spook show was a chance for a theater to make a bunch of money, often just kind of cash off the books, by bringing an entertainer and a special thing there, and selling out shows at a time when they didn't have any other way to make money. So they'd be selling concessions and tickets and everything else. And so it worked out really, really well for them. And it went gangbusters from about the 40s all the way up through, I think Philip Morris, the original Dr. Evil, his last tour was in Canada in, I want to say like 1974, something like that. But basically by 1970, 1971, here in America, the spook show racket was all done. There was nothing you could do. Back in the day, all of the theaters used to have stages. They were all movie palaces. So even the local neighborhood theaters all still had stages. They were big, 1,000-seat, 1,200-seat rooms. And those all got replaced by the multiplexes that were just big, giant boxes with hanging curtains around, and no place to really do these things. So that kind of signaled the end, along with changing tastes. Curfews came into play. A lot of absolutely terrible performers got into the spook show business and kind of killed it. So audiences kind of got sick of getting ripped off because a lot of these guys, they call, ghost masters, spook show performers, they would promise the world. I mean, they come see the reincarnation of Marilyn Monroe, and James Dean, and the ghost of James Dean, and ghosts fly and smack you in the butt, and all this crazy stuff. And towards the end, even the performers who had big productions, they just kind of got lazy with it, and so the whole thing became kind of a farce of itself, and it kind of died out that way.
Yeah, that's too bad because, like I said, I was very disappointed when I first discovered them, probably in my late teens, early 20s. I was very excited, and then I realized that there were no more. And I'm sure there was a lot of competition with not only movie theaters and drive-ins, but also just the type of entertainment. My understanding was that, like, when something like The Exorcist came out, or even Night of the Living Dead, it sort of changed the audience's taste. So these shows were a little bit tongue-in-cheek or cheesy to begin with, and then the audiences wanted something more sophisticated. Is that true?
Yeah, I would say that that's a really fair assessment. Yeah, I mean, campy is the number one the number one way I could describe some of the spook shows.
Yes.
It was very kind of burlesque, tongue in cheek. Not burlesque as far as people think burlesque today is stripping.
Right, but it's not.
They're dumb, but it has nothing to do with it at all.
Right.
But yeah, it was a very comical, funny, spooky, kind of thing, and we kind of all just flipped the script on that as a society and went, hey, look, let's do gore and psychological, thriller, horror, whatever, and that kind of taste did change. Yeah.
Right. So, can you tell us what it's like for your shows? Like, if I'm an audience member, what should I expect when I go into one of Dr. Scream's shows?
So we tried to. Let me go back to kind of the beginning of how we got involved. I'm an attorney now. I have a law practice up in Michigan, but before I went to law school and did all that kind of stuff, I got a scholarship and stuff to it's sort of like lawyers being like my third career. I was a magician comedian, and I did cruise ships and resorts and stuff all over the world, and I grew up kind of in the magic magician world, magician community. And one of my good friends growing up as a kid was a guy by the name of Philip Morris, who ended up founding Morris Costumes. I mean, just one of the biggest costume wholesalers in the entire world.
Right.
Charlotte, North Carolina. And he kind of built his empire on two things, literally a multi-million-dollar empire on two things. One was spook shows, and the other was the costume business, starting with the gorilla costumes. In fact, he was the one that allegedly sold and sewed up the famous Bigfoot costume that was in the Patterson film.
The Patterson film, yeah.
Yeah. And so Phil actually grew up not far from the little town of Colon, Michigan, which is where I'm sitting in right now. It's sort of known as the magic capital of the world, and home of Abbott's Magic Company. And Abbott's Magic Company had a big convention every year, and I used to go there as a kid. So that's where I got to meet Phil. And Phil would tell these amazing stories after the conventions while we're sitting in the bar at the Legion, American Legion here, telling me about his spook show days. And I was captivated as a kid. So fast forward a bunch of years, it's I think 2003. I'm in Las Vegas going to UNLV for college. And a good buddy of mine, Scott Alexander, was a really well-known magician, did phenomenal on AGT and that. We were hanging out talking about spook shows and how it'd be cool to do one. And a Halloween convention came to town. Nice. And Philip was going to be there. And they were looking for some entertainment. So I pitched them the idea, hey, what if you guys had an old school spook show? For the attendees, it's sort of like a one-off thing, and they liked it, and we had a budget for it. We put it together, and I spent, a lot of hours on the phone with Phil Morris, kind of talking about, what these things were like and how to do them. And then we also had the book. There's a great book that Mark Walker put out many, many years ago called Ghost Masters. So we used that as some reference material. Mark Walker's a great guy.
Yeah.
So we put together the show and we did it, and Philip Morris was there, and he was laughing his rear off at the end of the show. He came up to us and he was like, he's like, for a couple of kids who never got to see one of these things, he's like, you guys nailed it. He's like, that was so much fun. He was so kind and complimentary, and to us it was it was like the Pope telling a priest, hey kid, nice sermon. You know what I mean? It was just it was really cool. And so it always kind of stayed in the back of my mind as something that I wanted to do again. I ended up moving back to the Midwest, got married in that, and Scott went off and did cruise ships, and is still just has an amazing career as an entertainer. And, I was sitting around and I was like, man, I really wish I could do the spook show thing again. And my wife was, she was like, why don't you just do it? So we took the notes that we had kind of compiled in 03. I got back on the phone with Phil, and I ended up, piecing together a show that I could pitch to performing arts centers. And because it was a throwback, I mean, we don't have the kind of modern, you don't have the movie theaters that these things used to be in.
Right.
And so we pitched it as a nostalgic show. And it was kind of hard to do because we kind of have to educate the audience. They don't know what a spook show, by and large, today's audiences don't know what a spook show is.
Exactly.
But a lot of what we learned was, and finally saw, a lot of grandparents were starting to bring their grandkids out because they remembered these things, as a teenager. So we did basically 7 seasons, I think, of, 5-week tours through Michigan and Ohio. Doing this stuff. And then 2 years ago, we didn't take it out publicly. We did 2 private events. And then we were slated to do it actually this year. Again, another a short 3-week public tour. And then, we all know what happened. We're all living in this whole, the new COVID world.
Right.
So, that kind of put the proverbial nail in that coffin. But we're aiming for 2021 as long as, venues can open up and we don't have to deal with a bunch of, capacity restrictions and stuff.
Right.
So anyway, that's a long way to get to your original question.
That's okay. I was going to ask you all that anyways.
Yeah, it's good. When you come to when you come to our show, what do you see? And we basically took a look at and interviewed a lot of the guys that were still around, of which there's not many. And we're like, what are the greatest things? What are the most important elements in the live show, in the Spook Show's heyday? And I'm not talking like the later 60s and 70s when it was just, it turned out these things devolved into literally a crusty old guy in a tuxedo doing 3 card tricks, telling 4 lame jokes, and then turning out the lights, and the audience would just get pissed.
And didn't they also devolve into sort of a Grand Guignol with lots of blood and gore?
Not so much. There was some performers that did that, but really, it didn't really go that gruesome. Only because as screens were starting to be permanently installed on the stages, they didn't really have the resources to do that kind of stuff. Now there was a couple one-off guys that were doing that kind of stuff, but by and large, it would be a crusty old guy with three of the cheapest tricks he could buy from Abbott's here in Colon, and a couple bits of washcloth, that they stole from their mom's rag bin that they dipped in glow-in-the-dark paint, and that was about it. It was it was rough. It was bad. It was really bad.
Wow.
And then the audiences got kind of hip to it, so they like to bring in stuff like in the early to mid 60s. They would almost like attack the performers. One of the best spook show guys out there was a gentleman by the name of Roy Houston. He's buried here in Colon. Just a phenomenal guy, just a great guy. And he worked with a guy, Jack Baker, Dr. Silkini, who was by far probably the biggest spook show producer there was. Right. Silkini at the time actually had like 9 different units on the road doing spook shows at the same time. He made spook shows into a multi-million-dollar business. It was crazy.
Wow.
But anyway, Roy Houston's working for Jack Baker, Dr. Silkini, and he tells stories about them coming off stage and then the stage looked like it was fruit salad. By the time the blackout happened, people would just be throwing eggs and fruit and all sorts of stuff. Just at the performers, it just evolved into mayhem and madness. It was just this. They were just destroying theaters, and they had to start insuring the screens because the kids would come out just for a rowdy time at night. Right. And that finally just kind of, that kind of is how the whole thing sort of wrapped up. But for our show, we asked these guys, what were the best things that guys did? The best operators in the spook show business. What did they do? And so we kind of made like a greatest hits, right? Of spook show material. So we had a magical appearance. So Dr. Scream appears, in a puff of smoke and a coffin kind of looking cabinet, and there's a brief little hypnotism bit, and there is the traditional stuff, sawing a lady in half, making somebody float. With the sawing in half, we use the big giant buzz saw, so they actually see the saw go into her flesh and blood and guts fly all over the place. We have a spirit cabinet kind of seance routine where somebody the performer, Dr. Scream, gets all tied up so he can't influence anything, and he goes in this little curtained cabinet with an audience member, and all this strange stuff starts to happen. Spooks are making racket and take a guy's shirt off, and there's all the funny comedy bits like that. And And so that's what people see. They see the kind of the stereotypical greatest hits of campy horror themed magic and comedy. And then one of my favorite parts of the show is every single show, an audience member actually wins a real dead body, and
cool.
we give away a real dead body at the end of every show. And what's so great for me was going on a lot of the publicity we do via local television stations. We have some TV advertisements and stuff that we all had made up in the vintage style. If you search on YouTube, you can look at Dr. Scream's Spook Show Revival, commercials or coming to a theater or whatever. You'll find some of that stuff.
Nice.
And but I love going on the morning talk shows, and I'll just start blurting out, and don't forget, we're going to give away a real dead body. And oh man, the TV producers go nuts. Like, how can you say that? What are you doing? Don't you can't say you're giving away. And I'm like, no, man, we do. We give away a real dead body. I didn't say that it's a human body, but we give away a real dead body every show. And that's one of our favorite bits because it's just it's both creepy and funny, and
that's awesome.
it gets a ton of attention. It's something people talk about. And then just like the classic spook shows, after the about 45, 15-minute live show, all the lights in the theater go out, and the entire stage is filled with glowing, dancing skeletons, and ghosts fly right over the head. Glowing ghosts fly right over the head of the audience all throughout the theater, and the audience actually feels swamp bugs and spiders crawling down the back of their neck, and then instantly after a couple minutes, all the lights go on. There's nothing to see, and then we treat them to a classic horror movie, and it's a lot of fun. It's a campy, retro, good time, and it's an absolute blast to do.
That's so awesome and so amazing. Do you have any safety challenges with the blackouts?
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. When you go in and ask a theater manager, hey, how can I kill power to the entire auditorium so nobody can even see their hand in front of their face? You're definitely met with some resistance. Using and sometimes we have to do quite a bit of explanation of kind of our safety protocols that we have in place, but we do have safety protocols in place, utilizing technology that they didn't have back in the day, night vision and some of the really advanced luminescent technology that's used in the aviation industry. We've sort of been able to create a plan that as of yet we've never been turned down on, so we've always been allowed to do it. And it's also important to remember that it doesn't last a really long time. I think the blackout's about 2.5, 3 minutes long.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So that does kind of help. But yeah, it's something that we have to be very careful about. And we use technology to achieve some of the same exact effects, but in a much safer way than they used to. They used to actually send performers in all black jumpsuits running up and down the aisles with big bamboo poles with glowing fabric on the end. Well, you can't do that anymore.
Right.
You trip, you get a concussion, you break a leg, whatever.
Oh my God.
But yeah. But luckily now there's some technological wizardry that we're able to use to make the exact same thing happen without human intervention and anybody getting hurt. So
well, that's good.
Yeah, we're able to pull it off, and it works really well.
Well, that's great. That's awesome. So I'm curious to know, in your research when you were starting up the spook shows, did you find that the audiences in the, say, the 30s and 40s when they were first starting, which I think the audiences were probably a little more naive back then, do you think when the seances played, they tended to believe them at first until they realized it was a show?
Yeah, I think at first, this kind of entertainment at first started very serious. And then over time, it sort of, as the universal monsters and everything sort of took a grip, I think it kind of, I don't want to say devolved, but I think it just evolved into something different. It evolved into sort of a more mainstream entertainment. I think people didn't really think that real dead bodies were, trying to communicate with them. It definitely became more of an entertainment based thing. But, in the 20s, in the 1920s and 30s, I mean, spiritualism, as an actual religion.
Oh, yeah, it was huge.
It was massive. I mean, it was massive. And people were really, really, believed in that stuff. And, yeah, it's crazy. Speaking of that and Philip Morris, Philip Morris kind of taught me something interesting that I never really knew or thought about till he would talk about it. in spirit seances, you traditionally hear the, spirits, can you hear me? Tap 1 for yes or 2 for no, that kind of signaling. And I never thought about the whole, why would a ghost tap as opposed to just talk or whatnot?
Right.
And his explanation was, back when spiritualism started really taking hold in America and throughout the world, it was kind of right after the Civil War. And the idea of both wireless and long distance telecommunication was a very, very, very new concept. And the tool that we had to do it was Morse code, was all tapping.
Oh, okay.
So the theory was, these people thought basically that there was some sort of a telegraph system to the spirit world, because that's how you would communicate. There wasn't anything mysterious about it. That's how you would communicate, That's fascinating. Yeah. Today, if you frame that same argument today, you would think that a spirit would take over your cell phone and just send you a TikTok video or something. I don't know. But yeah, so that's kind of where that whole tapping, that's kind of where all that stuff came from. And charlatans would go around and basically deliver tapped, Morse coded messages, to loved ones in exchange for money, sort of a scam to take advantage of, widows, families that were suffering and such. And I think that's where also a lot of the modern skeptic movement kind of came from, and guys like James Randi and those type folks kind of debunking, these charlatans that, really are preying on people's sincerely held beliefs.
Well, and Houdini too. He was a famous debunker because he wanted to believe it.
Yeah, Houdini was obviously huge. The last tours of his life, a whole section of the show was just devoted to debunking spiritualism. And it's funny how, the mainstream America doesn't really even, spiritualism has been on such a decline that they don't even think of Houdini in that light, but back in the day before he died, he was testifying in Congress against spiritualism and against these people doing this kind of stuff. And I think finally enough high profile people kind of were into that mode that it's probably one of the reasons too that a lot of the seances kind of ended up kind of going away outside of a small select group of kind of weirdo true believers, and it became more mainstream entertainment. That it was something that was fun as opposed to trying to actually talk to dead people.
Right. So you mentioned earlier about how in the 60s you kind of had the kids that would get unruly and almost destroy the whole theater. I had read about that as well, that the rise, I guess simply because after World War II, kids didn't have to go to work at such an early age. They were allowed to be kids. And so there was born the teenager, which they didn't really call them that before then. So you had all these kids with all this free time on their hands. And so what are they going to do? They're going to go to these cool shows. But then after a while, they became unruly, juvenile delinquents, if you will, as what they were labeled at the time. Have you ever had to deal with any sort of, rude audiences or hecklers or unruly people?
We've been really, really lucky. We have not had to deal with that. And I think in part that's because our show is it's a retro nostalgia thing in a performing arts center, and people kind of are going with the mindset of they want a good time to experience kind of yesteryear.
Right.
We don't really get and the ticket price, around $20, people don't really go drop $20 to just be a hooligan. Ticket prices in the back of the day were 25 cents or 50, whatever a high school kid wouldn't bat an eye about coming in. Everything that we do now is much more it's much more family friendly, and it's definitely a different, our demographic for our show is not the stereotypical demographic of the traditional spook show at all. So yeah, that isn't really an issue that we've had to deal with.
That's great. So in putting the shows together, what has been probably the biggest challenge in putting your spook show together?
The biggest challenge that we've faced is educating both the theater booker as well as the audience on what exactly it is we're trying to do. Right? Because they're like, okay, so is it a magic show or is it is it a movie? It's kind of a weird thing, especially if they're younger than, the baby boomer generation. So that's the biggest challenge. Challenge number one, you got to kind of educate people as far as what it is. And we always just say, basically, it's a magic show, haunted house, and horror movie all wrapped up into one experience. And that's kind of like, oh, okay. So it's three different things and it's all in one night. Like, yep, that's what it is. Okay.
That's awesome. And that's what this show is about, is I've said this before, that when my son was born, I felt the need to bring him up to speed on all the cool stuff that he missed out on. And that's sort of where this show comes from, is that there's a whole generation out there that has no idea about certain things they should know about. And I think Spook Shows is a great, cool piece of almost forgotten entertainment that they would enjoy if they just knew about it.
Right. I totally agree. It hits on all the popular things today. Like let's just face it, right? Vintage and retro stuff experiences are in, right? Because the stuff's fun, right? People are both looking to see what used to be. People are looking to rediscover their childhood. Right. And then horror's never gone out of fashion. Come on now. Some of the most profitable dollar for dollar movie productions that have been made are horror movies.
That's right.
And and going to the theater, that's sort of, I don't know. I always looked at it like, what kind of experience? Yeah, I'm a theater junkie, regardless of Spook Shows or whatever. As a magician, I studied theater in college. I love live theater. I love live theater 18 million times more than I like film. Live theater, I think, is just awesome. It's unpredictable. You never know what's going to happen. There's a lot more possibilities. It's a bit more immersive, I believe. It's even somewhat interactive, even if you're not directly, obviously, interacting with the actors.
Right.
And a lot of people today aren't, especially our young folks, aren't having that kind of direct experience with the theater. So I always kind of take a little bit of pride in the fact that sometimes I am able to get people who would not normally come to a theater to actually come to a live show, a live theatrical show. And if this campy horror genre is the vehicle that I can expose people to live theater with, then I'll take it. I'll consider it a win, because that means that if they have a good time sitting in there watching something live on stage that's not just reproduced on film, maybe they'll go to a show of some other kind the next week and the next week and the next week. I'm a firm believer in, when you go to the theater, you maybe you don't fully, suit up, but you put on a jacket and you dress up, and it's a social thing and it's a cultural thing, and it's something to really enjoy. And so anything I could always do, in my career to kind of help foster that, theater is a respectable place and form of entertainment, I'm all for. So that's one of the most rewarding things about the whole experience.
That's excellent. Yes, and I agree. I think theater is something that's been slipping away from this modern generation. Now, in terms of the sort of the gimmicks and stuff that you've put on with the Spook Shows, there was one that I read about that I loved, where on the stage they sort of had a giant glass that was slanted, and there was a mirror. So there was the person's on stage, the performer, and then you've got a lady dressed up like a ghost, and they're using the glass in the mirror to reflect her behind the performer, so it looks like she's on stage with him, but she also looks translucent.
Yes. You're talking about, what you're talking about is the Pepper's ghost illusion.
Yes.
Yeah. I could tell you with a huge amount of certainty, Pepper's ghost was never really used on any touring sideshow Spook Shows, because it's just so unbelievably impractical to do, because these shows would have to move, like, Silkini's shows, everybody's, Caracoom's shows, Dr. Rome, all these guys, the Spook Show was almost always a one-nighter deal. Right. So they would come in on Wednesday at 2 p.m, set everything up, and then at 2 a.m, they would tear it all down, drive to the next town, find a motel, sleep for 6 hours, wake up and do it again. They did not have the ability to do that kind of thing. Now, I can tell you, earlier, before the Spook Show genre, and some of the more formal seance shows and even like big like operas and musicals, that kind of technology, Pepper's ghost stuff, was used. And And that technology is still being used in Disney's Haunted Mansion today in the ballroom scene.
Oh, okay.
That's how those ghosts appear and dance around. That's what that is.
Yeah, I would imagine like trying to transport giant pieces of glass or mirror would not be good because they would all ultimately end up breaking.
Yeah, there's no way to do it. There's no way to do it practically. There's a whole other genre of entertainment that I'm very, very involved in. That is the circus sideshow, and that's probably a conversation for a different day. But one of the productions that we have is called the Great American Sideshow Company, and we operate one of the last girl to gorilla shows. Maybe we could talk about that at some point in the future, but that relies heavily on the Pepper's Ghost illusion and does involve a giant chunk of glass. And but again, it would not at all be practical for a theater environment to try and tour, with that kind of stuff. But there's some really, really amazing things that that people have come up with to make ghosts and apparitions and that kind of stuff appear. But the spook show world's much too low tech for that, fortunately or unfortunately.
Right. So now you play the a classic horror movie at the end of the shows, just like the old shows. What films have you played?
So we've done a bunch of them, but the film that I love the most was actually it's a short film. It's only about 40 minutes, and it was put together by a friend of mine who unfortunately we lost a few years ago. His name was David L. Hewitt, and Hewitt ended up making independent films when he was real young, and kind of cheesy horror films, but he ended up doing special effects on major films like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and a couple other things.
Wow.
He made a movie called Monsters Crash the Pajama Party.
Yep.
And unfortunately, some studios, I don't know, probably 20-something years ago, got a hold of a couple of reels and put a version of it out on DVD. So you can kind of see some of the footage. The only problem was they put the reels together in the wrong order. So It doesn't really make a whole heck of a lot of, and without any explanation. So it doesn't really make a whole heck of a lot of sense. But before Hewitt passed, I mean, we talked extensively about it, and he told me straight up, he's like, hey man, he's like, I don't really know that I have the rights to it per se, because it's been ripped off so much, but he's like, I give you full rights to whatever rights I might have left in the movie. If you guys are going to use it in the spook show, and keep it alive, but just do me a favor and put it together how it's supposed to actually be. So we did. So the last 5 seasons, we've been using that movie. And the cool thing about Monsters Crash the Pajama Party is that it's actually an interactive movie. At a point in the movie, a gorilla and a monster actually jump off the screen, pick up a girl from the audience in the actual live theater where people are sitting.
Right.
They capture her, they jump back into the movie with her, and then they tickle torture her to death because that's the perfect cheesy ending. And there's a bunch of gimmicks basically built into that movie that are sort of interactive. When Hewitt made it, he made that movie to be kind of a standalone interactive attraction that he could book independently. That sort of like a crude version of 3D immersion movie come to life kind of deal. And it's also a huge hit. Like, it's a huge hit. It's corny as hell, but it's so much fun.
Oh yeah, I have the DVD and it makes absolutely no sense. And now you've explained it to me why.
Yeah. The reels are totally in the wrong order. I mean, most people don't even watch the entire movie because they ended up putting the credit reel of this just nonsensical gorilla thing like up front. It makes no sense. It makes zero sense at all. So
that's funny. Have you ever considered teaming up with? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I don't know if it was something weird or whoever put it together. You done did it wrong. You should have talked to David. He was kind of pissed about it.
It was something weird. Have you ever considered teaming up with independent filmmakers nowadays to have them maybe make low budget films specifically to be shown at your performances?
I would absolutely love to do that. I don't kind of being a busy guy. I don't really have the just kind of the time to go out and necessarily make that happen. But if all the independent movie makers who are currently listening to your podcast want to get in touch with us, yeah, I would be totally open to it. Fred Olin Ray, I don't know if that name rings a bell at
Absolutely.
all. Okay, Fred Olen Ray is a good buddy of mine, fantastic actor, and used to be a wrestler and a sideshow guy. He's just a cool guy. I just love the guy. But we had actually talked about trying to use a couple of his movies, and we both just got so freaking busy with other projects. We haven't had a chance to yet. But there's a couple of newly restored venues that have come online in Michigan, and I would say that that's still a very, very, very good possibility of doing. So yeah, we're totally open with it, and I think there's interest out there.
That's awesome. And we'll definitely do our part in trying to spread the word to independent filmmakers to get in touch with you and see if we can make something happen.
That'd be phenomenal. That'd be awesome, man.
Prepare for a spine-tingling, nerve-shattering podcast featuring all your favorite monsters. You won't believe your ears when you listen to Monster Kid Radio. Here are your hosts, Derek M. Cook, and his ever-rotating stable of guests discuss your favorite classic and sometimes not-so-classic monster movies. Subscribe to Monster Kid Radio through iTunes or Stitcher, or visit monsterkidradio.net before the next weekly episode of Monster Kid Radio. Go through the archives for interviews with Sarah Karloff, Victoria Bryce, and Joel Hodgson. Listen to discussions about movies like Creature from the Black Lagoon, Island of Terror, and King Kong. And don't forget convention coverage from Monster Bash and the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival. Classic monsters, modern talk, and the head of Rondo Hatton. Only on Monster Kid Radio.
Hey folks, I just wanted to take a minute here to tell you about the hosting service that we use at Haven Podcasts. Podserve.fm. Podcast hosting has never been easier. They do all the work to get your podcast on Apple Podcasts and other major podcast networks. They help you navigate the podcasting world, whether you're brand new or have years of experience. Folks, I can't tell you how happy I am with their service. When I first started this podcast, I searched around intensely for the right hosting platform. I found Podserve and used their simple 4-step process, and in a short amount of time, my podcasts were on the internet and available through all the major podcast networks. And their customer support is unreal. Every time I goof things up and make a mistake, like posting the wrong show to the wrong feed, I email them, and I kid you not, within minutes I get a response and the problem is resolved. And they're the only podcasting host that actually helps you get listeners. Other podcast hosts stop at podcast upload and don't help promote your podcast. Well, Podserve makes sure your podcast is seen by thousands of people. The promotion is free, and they put you on podparadise.com, which has over 5,000 visits a day from avid podcast listeners and is growing every day. Each day, Pod Paradise selects 5 podcasts to spotlight on their front page. Maybe yours could be there soon. Podserve's pricing is simple. Only $19 a month. That's it. No tiered pricing platform, just one low fee. For $19 a month, you get unlimited storage, unlimited podcasts, free podcast promotion, your podcast on all platforms, detailed download analytics, one-on-one customer support. You pay month to month, and you can cancel at any time. And when you sign up, you get 14 days free. You don't even have to give them your credit card. I love their service so much I put a reminder in my phone to add my credit card when the 14 days was almost up. I couldn't give them my $19 fast enough. I'm telling you, I really didn't believe it until I actually signed up and saw my podcasts on everything from iTunes to Stitcher and Spotify and more in a ridiculously short amount of time. So if you've got a podcast and you don't have a hosting platform, I highly recommend podserve.fm. Check them out.
Hello, this is Rod Barnett. I'm the host of The Bloody Pit, the podcast that examines films from across the decades. On The Bloody Pit, we have several ongoing series of shows within the show focused on specific things in genre cinema that I and my co-hosts find fascinating. There's a long-running series focused on Italian maestro Antonio Margheriti's films from the 1960s all the way up through 1990. There's an on-again, off-again series focused on 1970s science fiction films. There's an in-depth look at the Western movies that William Castle made before he struck out on his own and became the horror auteur that we know and love. A look at the classic Coffin Joe films from Brazil. And our long-term project to look at every Universal horror film made in the 1940s. That's a long project, people. It's going to take us a long time. Sprinkled in amongst those are various other episodes focused on other stranger areas of cinema, like Lucio Fulci, Dario Argento, and even some obscure British crime films from time to time. So join me and my rotating crew of co-hosts as we examine the stranger side of cinema through an exploitation lens. Except when we don't. Yeah, you never really know exactly what to expect on The Bloody Pit. So join me for The Bloody Pit.
See Dr. Scream's Spook Show Revival live on stage. It's a magic show, haunted house, and classic horror movie all in one night. It's insane! See ghosts fly right over your head. See a woman burned alive. Warning, some unlucky person from the audience will win a real dead body. Kids, bring your parents. They might be too scared to come alone. And after the live show, you'll see a classic horror film. Dr. Scream's Spook Show Revival, October 21st and 22nd at the Maumee Indoor Theater. Tickets available at spookshowrevival.com and at the theater.
So have you ever, I'm sorry, you said you did your show regularly for several years. Have you ever traveled around with it, or was it just sort of in a localized area?
So we went all over Michigan. We went all over Northern Ohio. Did we do Indiana too? I think there was 2 venues in Indiana that we did as well. So it was kind of it was sort of a tri-state thing. We did end up going down to, we did a horror convention actually. I don't think it exists anymore, unfortunately. I think I heard that it, and I hope I'm not wrong about that. If it's still going, it was a great event, and I assume it's still a good event. We did the Mad Monster Party in Charlotte, North Carolina, actually in Philip Morris's backyard.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah, that was a hoot, and we had an offer to do 1 or 2 other like horror convention things, which we'd totally be open to, but just timing wise, it didn't work out. One was kind of close-ish to Halloween. We had our regular season going on, so we weren't able to figure it out. But yeah, if anybody in July has got like a horror con going on, they want something unique and totally different, we're open.
Excellent. You should check out the Monster Bash too. I think that's in Pennsylvania. They do a lot of great classic monster themed stuff, and I think that's right up their alley.
Let's check that. I think I've heard of it, but I haven't had the pleasure of going out there yet.
Right, yeah, they're run by a guy named Ron Adams, and he also owns a website called Creepy Classics where he sells, DVDs and magazines and stuff, and he puts on the Monster Bash, I think, once, maybe twice a year, although this year, not so much. They did it to something online. But yeah, I think definitely hooking up a spook show with a horror convention is a brilliant idea.
Yeah, I think it'd be a lot of fun. I mean, everybody the cast of my show is 6 or 7 folks. Half of which are related family members, and the other half are just good friends who absolutely love like vintage campy horror stuff. And so we just, it's everybody does it for the love of it. I don't think we make a nickel. I'm sure we blow way the hell more cash on the whole thing that we've ever made. And we've sold out a couple of big houses too. Man, I'll tell you what, I don't know what it is about Ohio, but man, those people in Ohio, they freaking like their horror and their souvenirs. Cool. Like it's crazy. Like, we did pretty well in Michigan, man, but when you go down to Ohio, to Toledo, the one venue in Toledo in particular in the area, we're just like, good Lord, where do these people come from? It was phenomenal. That's cool.
Well, they had a lot of famous horror hosts come out of there too. Like, wasn't there a Dr. Shock and Ghoulardi, I think?
They did. And then it was Cleveland and Detroit both had Svengoolie.
Yep.
Was Svengoolie? Yeah, I think it was Svengoolie. Yeah, there was a bunch of those guys that came out of that area, so it's just kind of ripe, and that's really the hotbed for like haunted houses and everything as far as that kind of stuff goes too. So
nice,
yeah,
nice.
It's
so
just a cool.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's just a cool area.
That's awesome. So, do you feel like you have to come up with bigger and better gimmicks with each show, or do you ever try to top yourself?
I mean, we kind of do, but we kind of have a formula and a script. I mean, it's kind of it's a show. There's 3 or 4 pieces we kind of rotate in and out. And there's a couple of venues that we can do a couple of kind of neater things that we can't do in some of the smaller venues that we do. So the same basic format is the same. There's no major changes or toppers year over year. But anybody that saw, 2 or 3 years in a row, you saw a substantial difference in chunk of material. That's just to kind of keep it fresh. But the thing that really surprised me. Now, my wife kind of predicted it actually, but I didn't really think it was going to be the case. It kind of becomes like a family tradition for a lot of people. We have a ton of people that would come every year and like bring other friends and family and stuff. And they're like, yeah, it's like a Halloween tradition. Like we go, we go to the Spook Show and then we go to the bar and, and have a good time. And that's just kind of, That's our Halloween thing. That's what we do. That's awesome. There's a lot of people who really aren't into the whole, like, somebody jumping out at you in the traditional haunted house. And it's haunted house-y, but this is a different thing, Right. So we get a lot of that. So
I mean, what do you do for like music? Do you have to license music, or do you have someone that makes the music for you?
We've done both actually. We've licensed some music, and then actually we had a 2 or 3 pieces now, kind of custom composed, which is really cool. You can't really. You got to be careful as to what venues and who's got the ASCAP, BMI, licenses and all that. You can run up all that stuff pretty easy, but there isn't really any like popular music. We're not. The encore isn't done to Thriller or anything like that. So the same thing goes with the movies. Like one of the reasons that we have whatever rights are necessary. Not like there's really any anymore, unfortunately, anyway. But the Monsters Crash the Pajama Party. We also used a couple of public domain movies. House on Haunted Hill was one that we showed a few times. And nice. Yeah. And
I noticed you play some of the old Casper cartoons.
Yeah. Yep. We show 1 or 2 of the quick Casper cartoons, before the main movie. So we try to make the movie segment about an hour, and Monsters Crash is about 40 minutes. So we put about 10, 12 minutes of Casper cartoons in there, and then you're good to go. And it's funny too how funny that old Casper stuff is. Like people are gut bustingly laughing.
Yeah.
And some of the Casper stuff is a little bit like, man, was this really designed for a kid? Like there's some innuendo in that stuff that's just like freaking hilarious. Really funny.
I always remember one that disturbed me as a kid where he goes to the moon for whatever reason, like because nobody will be his friend, which is the usual case. So he goes to the moon to find some new friends, and there's these evil tree monsters. And he flies into the ground because, he can pass through solid objects, and reaches up, grabs their feet, pulls them down, and ties them together. And that just bothered me.
That is funny, man. It's funny. Oh, yeah, those guys. Any of those old cartoons, it's so funny, everybody's so politically correct and whatever nonsense about their kids and stuff today.
Right.
It's like, did y'all not watch like Looney Tunes or whatever? Like, hello, like, the Acme crap and blowing stuff up and trying to kill the rabbit and everything else. I mean, good Lord.
I don't think any kid has ever dropped an anvil on another kid's head from watching Bugs Bunny.
I might have tried that with my sister on that. That's I could talk about that.
That's hilarious. So a lot of these original spook shows, when they were, it was a thing and it was happening throughout the country, they generally were at midnight, right?
They were at all times of the night, but yeah, they generally were quite late at night because they had to wait till all the regular features were off. But a lot of times they, 10 to midnight, yeah, was super popular.
And so what time do your shows generally go on?
Well, because our audience is a little bit older and we're catering to the tapioca crowd, usually 8 o'clock.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. That makes more sense. I think probably me too. I would want to go to an earlier show.
Yeah, we're playing performing arts centers that have like legitimate theater in them, so you kind of like can't really do that at midnight. It's
right. Right. A lot of people don't do midnight things, I don't think, too much anymore. Although recently, because of COVID I live in Maine, and because of COVID, the theaters shut down, but the drive-ins were kicking ass, doing great business. And there's one drive-in that's close to me that's been doing midnight horror movies every Saturday, and we've gone to several of them. And
Dude,
that's really fun.
That would be so unbelievably awesome. How late in the season are they able to go with it?
They're still going on right now. They just announced an event for this weekend, although I think their first show is at like 5 p.m., and then they do have a later one, but it's not going to be till like, I think, 10 or 10:30.
That's awesome. That is awesome. You know, some guys actually tried to do spook shows at drive-in theaters.
I wondered about that.
Yeah. Kind of a hero of mine, Don Davison. Don Davison was, I don't know if you ever heard the name or are familiar. This guy was super, super interesting.
I think I read about him doing my research.
Yeah, he kind of met a very unfortunate demise. I mean, I think alcohol kind of finally, and it's a couple other things kind of did him in. But Don, he was a hustler, and he was making movies and retitling crappy movies, and he was working for what was the company? Was it America's Picture API? American Picture International? AIP. Yeah, he was doing distribution for those guys for a while or whatever, but. He anything to make a buck. This guy, he was putting together these little road shows of these terrible kids that had no idea how to perform, and they would set up a couple little spotlights and some hokey magic tricks on the roof of the concession stands, which are at a drive-in, at least in Michigan, a lot of the concession stands are almost partially sunk into the ground, so you don't lose any of the the screen viewing. Like you could put it in the middle. And, so they only come up about 5 or maybe 6, 7 foot off the ground.
Okay.
And he was making these guys do these just horrible crap shows on the roof of the concession stand. You couldn't really do a blackout per se, but, Don Davison was so funny. This guy, he was also doing sex ed shows. That is a freaking funny thing to get into one day, man.
Oh my God.
He using like public domain medical film and stuff. And Don Davison he dressed up like a doctor, and he made this film, and he promised he was going to explain how the birds and the bees worked. He would book this thing at drive-ins, and then he would have girls, teenagers, like a teenage boy and a couple of girls dressed up as nurses and doctors. And they would go car to car selling, the secrets of sex or whatever, to kids at the drive-ins, because that's where they were all on their date. They all wanted basically a glorified nudie book,
Oh, God.
And, oh God, it was so funny. But he ran some just crazy spook show promotions. But anything to make a buck, man. Because kind of at the end there in the late '60s, as the theaters all started drying up, the drive-ins were hot, and to him it was he just saw it as another venue. Let's go put a crappy magic guillotine on the roof of a concession stand. Maybe a couple people will gather around and we'll call it a spook show, Didn't go over so hot, but whatever. He still he made his money, so who cares?
That's great. So you mentioned of one of the early pioneers of the spook show, Dr. Salkini. Can you talk about maybe some of your inspirations? Like there was a guy named Al Wynn, I think, who started before Salkini, and Salkini kind of stole some of his ideas. Who are your heroes in the spook show industry?
It's hard to say who stole what. Al Wynn and Herman Weber are basically, I think, the two guys who really kind of set the stage, set the tone for the modern, what ended up becoming the modern spook show. Both Elwyn and them. And in fact, Herman Weber even wrote a book. I think it might have been one of the first how-to manuals out of the spook cabinet. My real heroes kind of in the spook show game were probably the biggest influence would probably be Bill Neff, Neff the magician. Now Neff was a little bit different. He had a blackout and they showed a movie, but Neff was an actual legitimate, amazingly talented performing magician, very much equal in so many ways to like Harry Blackstone Sr. Or Thurston before him. But his magic show was beautiful, but it had a horror ghost theme. Right. And he didn't really want to be known as the kind of a spook show guy, but he kind of got pigeonholed into that. Theater managers basically demanded that he do stuff like a blackout after his show. And I don't think he was a big fan of that kind of stuff per se. But as a performer, as a magic performer, he was absolutely phenomenal. So I take a lot of inspiration from him. I take a lot of inspiration from the stories and the campiness and the goofiness of, of Phil Morris, only because he was, we were pretty close. And then I'm still good friends with his family and his widow, but I only got a few days to hang out with Roy Houston, before his passing, which was far too young. And wow. Roy was a phenomenal all-around magician as well, and did a ton of spook shows. And Roy worked in the circus industry and whatever. I think those three guys are probably my biggest, my biggest influences as far as the actual show goes, because they were all doing at some point actual good magic material that was entertaining, even if it wasn't in a spook show. They just kind of put that kind of material into the spook show format to make it work and to make money. There's other guys that fascinate me. So that's the show part. The business part, the guys who fascinate me are guys like Don Davison's probably number one. Kroger Babb. Carricoom was a guy on the West Coast. Carricoom, he had the worst schlock shows there were. People, they'd want to burn down the theater, man, when he came through. It was just, he would promise. He would tell you that you'd be literally, anointed by the actual body of dead Elvis if he could to sell a ticket. His ad campaigns were completely out of this world. Just insane. His ad campaigns were. The show was just like, you'd show up and the show was like a 12-year-old kid, with some glow paint and a card trick. And people they'd go nuts, when all the advertising and marketing is first time at this theater, never here, seen before, there was a reason for that, because people had gotten burned going to see these crappy shows. They didn't want to go back, so you had to advertise it. This one wasn't like the last crappy one you saw. And it was usually the same damn guy. It was the same damn guy. You get some other 15-year-old kid, give him two other tricks, So that sped up the demise. And then Silkini with his machine. Can you imagine playing 9 cities a night, 6 nights a week, 54 cities a week?
Good heavens.
For years and years and years. That's just that's crazy. That's crazy.
Wow.
It was an actual business. It was a real industry for a long time.
That's amazing, and that's something that's just lost. I don't think many people would know what such a huge industry it was.
Yeah.
And you have to.
I think Roy told.
Go ahead.
No, you have to be what?
Well, I was going to say you have to be a really good showman or a carnival barker to be able to pull off that length and that amount of work that Silkini did.
I would agree. He was very, very, very much the showman. Roy Houston would I think it was Roy that would tell me, the story, and he told other people as well. He would talk about, he talked about talking to a theater manager who hated spook shows. And he'd be like, if you hate what we do so much, why do you bring us back to your theater 3 times a year? Every quarter. Some of these theaters were having spook shows, every 4 months, 3 months, they would have a friggin' spook show. And he goes, yeah, I hate you guys. I absolutely hate when you guys come in. But the reason I bring it back is I look at the books, right? And after paying the studios their fees and everything, I booked Gone with the Wind, and it grossed, $150 on Friday, and I sold $200 in concessions, and then Saturday it maybe did $200 in tickets and $250 in concessions. You guys come in, we don't have to pay any studios anything because it's independent. You sell $400 worth of tickets. You sell $600 of popcorn and candy, most of which ends up on the floor or thrown around, and you do it at a time where I can't even be open, showing any other movies. So that's why I have you guys. It was just the profit incentive was just massive.
It's a no-brainer.
Yeah, it's a total no-brainer.
One of the things I love too when I think about the spook shows, it reminds me of Joe Dante's film Matinee, because it was partially inspired by William Castle, who himself was, a great showman with all his gimmicks, but it was also inspired by spook shows. Have you seen the movie?
I have. That is a flipping phenomenal movie. And William Castle, William Castle's not really a spook show guy, but his gimmicks, he is one of my just entertainment showbiz just heroes. He is so absolutely, I think, unsung for his contribution, and just he's so much smarter than I think a lot of people gave him credit for.
Oh yeah.
and I'll tell you this, he wrote an autobiography. It's one of the best autobiographies I've ever read in my entire life. Seriously. A lot of people don't even know about it. It's called, I think it's called Step Right Up, I'm Going to Scare the Pants Off America. Search it on Amazon. Somebody reissued it. Maybe his daughter or a grandkid or something reissued it. And it was available on Amazon as of, a year or two ago. You couldn't get it for a long time. But if you're into this kind of stuff that we're talking about, he talks about making the skeleton gimmick, the ergo gimmick for House on Haunted Hill.
Right.
And the buzzers in the seats on Tingler.
The Tingler,
all the real scoop is in that book. He was the major player. He was the producer, the major guy behind Rosemary's Baby.
That's right. He mortgaged his house to finance that film.
Yeah. And he was a major player, but always kind of on the DL, just crazy.
Yeah, that's awesome. So considering what you just told us about William Castle and stuff, I assume you're a horror fan or even a monster kid, correct?
I am a horror fan. I wouldn't consider myself a monster kid. I got into it when I was a kid. I was terrified of this crap. I couldn't watch a horror movie. I'm dead serious, man. I was the kid. I don't even know how I ended up getting into this stuff. Something eventually just clicked in my brain that I thought it was fun. I was the kid at 10 years old. I don't think I could make it through a single haunted house. Like, I'd go to a haunted house. My parents would take me. Got my poor mom. I'll tell you. So, I was, my parents divorced, and, neither one had, I kind of grew up with my parents. I mean, they were kind of young, and neither one of them had a lot of money, before they got their degrees and businesses going on and remarried and everything else. And my poor mom, she didn't have two nickels to rub together. And I begged her for weeks and weeks and weeks to take me to this haunted house that wasn't far from her house. It was this great haunted house everybody yacked about. I was so flipping scared crapless that they had to basically let us out. I mean, terrified. Terror.
Oh my God.
She wasn't getting a refund, and she couldn't really afford it at the time either. I mean, I just got to confess. Sorry, moms, love you. Feel bad about that one.
That's funny.
So yeah, I mean, I don't even know, man. It wasn't until I was, probably in high school that I thought this stuff was cool.
That's funny.
As a kid, I couldn't cope, Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. I don't know.
I've always loved horror movies. I've always been scared by them. I still get scared by them. My wife and I have been watching the Conjuring series because there's a whole bunch of movies involved in that, and I still have the blanket and I'm jumping out of my chair at every scare. I remember being age 13. I begged my parents to take me to see Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D. And I begged them. They were like, fine, okay, because my parents loved horror movies, so we always watched them. And we're sitting in the theater, and the lights, it's kind of dim, but it's not getting ready for showtime yet. And I just start getting more and more nervous. And I'm like, oh, this is a bad idea. Why did I beg my parents to take me here? I don't want to be here. Luckily, I made it. I toughed it out and made it through the movie.
That's so funny, man. Yeah, I just, I get it though. I could relate. That stuff is just, you know what I just saw actually with a good friend of mine for the first time. They were in town. I had some friends in town, and we watched the trilogy of terror.
Yes, with Karen Black.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, man. That's some seriously hilarious stuff. There's some good startle moments in that, but man, that is so flipping wild. That was fun.
And that was, when I was a kid, that was scary because I remember seeing that on TV, and I thought that was terrifying. The Zuni doll chasing her around.
Yeah. Did you see it when it originally aired on TV?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. That'd have been cool.
I go way back. In 1972, I've told this story many times. I was 2 years old, the back seat of my parents' car at the drive-in, and we saw an anthology horror film with Peter Cushing called Asylum. And I will never forget that. I have vivid memories of that movie. And there's I don't know if have you ever seen Asylum?
I don't think I have, actually.
Okay, it's an Amicus film. It's not a Hammer film. It's Amicus with Peter Cushing, and it's a bunch of short stories. And in one of them, this lady chops up her husband and wraps the body parts in meat paper. And for whatever reason, the parts start to come out of the freezer in the basement that she put them in, and they start coming towards her. And I vividly remember that scene. It scared the pants off me as a kid. And what's really funny is for years, my mother and I couldn't remember the name of the film. We just called it Chopping Heads. Oh, remember Chopping Heads? And the wrapped up hand coming after her.
That's funny, man. Yeah, isn't it funny how you see something like that, it makes an impression as a kid, and that just kind of becomes, it sticks with you, and it's just that's probably what I like about the genre is it puts really fun, hopefully fun impressions on feeble minds, young minds.
Right. So have you ever considered maybe making horror videos as Dr. Scream, as a horror host, sort of like an ancillary project?
Yeah, I've always wanted to. In fact, I have a bunch of outlines for stuff. A good friend of mine, Bob Naismith out of Detroit, operates a series of low power broadcast television stations in Michigan, and they actually have quite a bit of cable coverage as well. And kind of the neat thing with digital broadcasting now is you got all these sub channels, and right. They basically on their one big network in Detroit have an independent movie channel that they run. And we've talked about doing that, and really kind of stinks because if we would have known COVID was going to go on this long, we probably would have shot a bunch of stuff in March or April to put it in the can so we could kind of horror host it out. You probably aware of Wolfman Mac?
Yes, of
who
course.
was on Retro TV for a while.
Yes.
So he's from our area, and he had a pretty successful run doing that as well. I'll tell you what, his operation was like. Was really like in depth. I mean, they had big scenes and a studio, and I mean, a whole cast of characters. That was really, really, really cool. I have some ideas of kind of what I do like to do on a little bit smaller basis with a smaller set. And I think that might happen in the future. I could definitely see it happening in the future, especially if what we're kind of going through right now with the capacity. I mean, it's really hard to launch any sort of a live show right now. And may even break even just because of this capacity issue. And I think if this lasts much longer, just to kind of cure that part of my aching, creative brain, I could definitely see doing something like that for 2021.
Awesome. That'd be great. I would be the first to tune in. Do you think? I don't think this is possible, but we were talking about live performances in real time, meaning you're at the theater. And there's a lot of live streaming going on. Do you think a spook show would work via live streaming or no?
I don't think so. It would be great if somebody proved me wrong. I never want to say never. There's so many creative, amazing people in this world. There might be a guy that could figure it out. My passion is in live theater. I think there's something especially magical when you get a group of people together for a group experience, in front of the live stage. And maybe that's just old school of me or whatever, but that doesn't intrigue me in the least.
Okay, that's kind of what I figured, because it's more of an intimate thing where you have to be there in person, especially with the blackout portion for that to be effective. Yeah. I mean, otherwise just watch a video of the show. I mean, what's the difference? I don't know. There's a lot of magicians and doing like Zoom shows and Zoom based entertainment. And it's just hard for me to wrap my brain around, why would I hire a guy, Joe Blow the magician, to do a comedy show for my friends and family that we're all logged on Zoom together? I mean, I guess he can say our names and maybe it's somewhat interactive. I mean, we could do that, or I could put in, I could get a recording of a David Copperfield special and watch the best of the best magic ever done anywhere. And isn't that better? I mean, I don't know. To me, I don't think I'm that old, but maybe it's just the old soul in me. It's like, why? I kind of don't get it. I'm sure that's where we're going, and maybe it'll become apparent to me over time that how wrong I am. But, and I fully do embrace digital in so many other areas of my life and marketing and business. Live theater's live theater, and there's something magical about that experience that really can't be replicated by other means, especially I think if you're trying to scare somebody. Right. So of all the performances that you've done, this is sort of a twofold question here, because the first question is not going to be so positive, and the second one is very positive. So bear with me.
Sure.
Of all the performances that you've done, have you ever had anything go wrong or have a crash and burn? And then the second part of the question is, do you have a favorite show or even a favorite act that you've ever done?
We've never had with the Spook Show. I mean, as an entertainer in general, yeah. I mean, we all have off nights. We all have nights that are way better than others. We've never had any catastrophes in the show. I mean, we're sort of kind of rehearsal junkies, so it all kind of more or less goes to plan without a whole heck of a lot of surprises. The hardest show on me ever happened to be like one of the best shows we ever did, which was really bizarre. And I've had that happen a couple times. It was, I don't know, the fifth season, maybe we were out there, and I got so unbelievably sick. I think I had the actual like straight up influenza, and my wife and brother-in-law, I think, were backstage basically running stuff, and I had like 104 fever. I'm pouring out sweat. I could hardly talk. I could hardly move, and I was puking in buckets all day. And they're like, well, we're going to cancel the show. And I was like, how many tickets do we sold? And they're like, you're sold out. I'm like, I ain't canceling the show. Wow. And it was, it was probably almost a dumb thing to do, because I literally came off stage and I there was a chair there, and I like kind of collapsed on the chair, and kind of like I literally kind of fell over. And they were like, shit, is he all right? Whatever. And it was, I didn't really know where I was. Like, but the actual show itself, like, we had the loudest, craziest screams, the best reaction. Like, it was the best thing ever. And they were like, oh my God, that was amazing. And I'm just like, I'm dead. And it was legit bad. I had to I think that night I ended up spending in the ER. I got dehydrated. It was not good. So yeah, I mean, but stuff happens, whatever.
Right.
My favorite show, I'll tell you the weirdest thing that happened.
Okay.
So I started doing the spirit cabinet routine, which is basically where you materialize spirits in this kind of cloth curtain, and funny stuff happens to an audience member that you bring into this cabinet with you, allegedly by ghosts. And traditionally you would kind of like hypnotize the spectator, and then these ghosts would come about and do funny things. Well, I noticed something happening, and actually my wife, who was assisting me on stage, was the first to kind of realize it. She's like, something weird happens when you look at these guys and you tell them, you snap your fingers and tell them to sleep. Sometimes, like, it looks like they're really going out. Like, wow. you're like a hypnosis performer or whatever. Now, I had seen hip shows. I think they kind of bore me to death. I have a couple of hypnotic, things that are like pretty tongue in cheek and like play along and whatever. But it was really weird. I remember one night in particular. I mean, this guy, it was like he was actually hypnotized. Like it was really strange. Like he was out, dude. And then like we were kind of like suggesting that he do stuff, and like he was just doing it like a robot, like he was out. And it was the funniest, borderline spooky thing ever. And I'm just thinking, and then we talked to him afterwards, and like at a regular hypnosis show, people are like, oh, I don't remember anything. And I was thinking, bullshit. Of course they remember. I'm just playing along. No, this guy was like that. He's like, I don't remember anything that happened. Blah, blah, blah. Wow. What the hell is going on? Like, is somebody screwing with me? But I don't think so.
That's scary. You need to explore that more.
I know. I really should. I just think that it's a conversation for another day.
Right.
Hip shows just bore the hell out of me. I don't know what they're great. I'm sure there's a million people who could tell me a million different things about personally, it's just like, okay, I can only sit there and watch somebody cluck like a chicken for so long before I'm just kind of bored.
Right. Do you have like a gimmick or a trick or something that you do that you've done it 1,000 times, but you just love it so much, and you're like, oh man, I can't wait. I get to do, X, Y, and Z trick today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a trick that I do in my normal shows. And I brought it over to the Spook Show. It's a card manipulation routine. It's basically kind of juggling with playing cards. It's 100% pure sleight of hand. It takes a reasonable amount of concentration and skill. There's no comedy. It's me with a deck of cards doing kind of amazing stuff. It always gets a huge reaction, and I genuinely look forward to it because it's always a challenge. And awesome. I just love it. I absolutely love it. It's like the highlight of my, it's the highlight of my show, just because I sometimes want to rush to the rest just so I can do that, because I just enjoy it.
That's great. So, Keith, I think we could literally talk for hours, but we're just about running out of time here. So we want to get the word out to younger audiences about Spook Shows. And what would you say about your show is the enticing thing in order to get younger audiences to attend?
The enticing thing. Look, you're going to see, if you come out to a Dr. Scream Spook Show Revival show, you are going to see the kind of live entertainment that people used to talk about, but you never really thought existed, but it does exist. It does exist. It's that fun. It's campy. It's a throwback to yesteryear. And you're going to see what your grandparents or great-grandparents talked about and realize that, yeah, it is cool and fun. It's just as cool and fun as they envisioned it. And, bring a date, come ready to scream and have a good time. And it's not just another cheesy horror movie. I mean, it's a fun night out. It's a connection to the past. And, at the same time, I think it inspires people to do new forms of art too. So it's just a hoot. It's just something different, everything's all the same today. I mean, how many horror movies are you going to go watch? Oh, I'm sitting there. Okay. It's spooky, blah, 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 blah. This is live and in your face. It's live and in your face. And
that's awesome.
That's the cool part about it.
That's awesome. Well, Keith, I'm so happy to have you on the show here and to talk about Spook Shows and what you do. Can you tell our audience where they can find you online and how they can get to see your shows?
Yeah, a couple things. Number one, the easiest way, check out on Facebook. Just search in Facebook, Dr. Scream's Spook Show Revival. If you search that on Facebook, you're going to find us. You'll find a bunch of video stuff from us on YouTube there. Also, spookshowrevival.com. I know it's a little funky with the WordPress right now, but that'll be cleared up by the time this goes out.
Okay.
spookshowrevival.com. There's some cool swag and merchandise stuff there. Also, if you Google that on Amazon, we put out a couple things. I have a pretty extensive collection of Spook Show movie trailers, the kind of things that used to advertise the show. There's DVDs are available on Amazon as far as that goes. So you can check it out. But yeah, if you just if you drop in any search bar, Dr. Scream's Spook Show Revival, you'll find us and get on our mailing list, like our page, and you'll get bombarded when something's coming up. I promise. We're pretty good about that.
Excellent. Well, it's been a pleasure talking with you. We hope you'll come back to the show in the future, not only to promote your upcoming shows, but to also maybe talk about the Girl to Gorilla shows or Don Davison's sex ed shows. I think we've got a lot more we need to talk about there, Keith.
Dude, I would absolutely love to. I'm passionate about that stuff. I absolutely love it. So anytime you want to chat about that stuff, let's do it.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us today.
Yep, you're welcome, man. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode of the Then Is Now podcast. We advise you to check out Dr. Scream's Spook Show Revival and give him all the support you can. Don't forget, if you want to chime in about this episode or give us ideas for future episodes, please email us at thenisnow42@gmail.com. You can also check out our website, havenpodcasts.com, and listen to our sister show, The East Meets the West, in which we discuss spaghetti westerns and Shaw Brothers films. Also, don't forget to go to wherever you download your podcasts from and leave us great reviews. That way more people can find our shows. I'm Rigor, signing off. Class dismissed.
See blood-curdling sadistic surgery. Someone's head will be cut off with a butcher knife and thrown to the audience. Don't lose your head. Do you believe that the out-of-space monster who died, yet alive, will come to seek the warm blood he needs to keep himself alive? Don't treat this lightly. How are you fixed for blood? The dead will return from graves. Ghosts and skeletons will fly above you, and some may sit by your side and plant cold, damp kisses upon your cheek.